In Oregon's northeastern corner, the Sumpter Valley Railway wound its way through a maze of forests and canyons. Local residents cherished the narrow-gauge stump dodger, but when the forest played out and folks started buying automobiles, no amount of goodwill could keep the line from dying. As the end approached, Alaska's White Pass and Yukon bought a pair of aging 282 Mikados from the Sumpter Valley. Their numbers 19 and 20 served out their days until they were too weary to ever run again. Over 40 years later, the same people who had rebuilt from scratch a section of the old Sumpter Valley Railway brought the 19's rusting hulk back to Oregon. With hard work, persistence, and luck, she would steam again. They began by removing the pieces to be repaired, replaced, or remanufactured from scratch. These rusting boiler pipes, for example, were pulled out one by one. And the steam fittings and cab were removed, until the engine looked like a riveted porcupine. Her original builders at the American Locomotive Plant in Schenectady, New York, began in 1920 with a boiler and worked outward. The restoration followed the same path. The work started in 1992 under the supervision of steam restoration expert Doyle McCormick.
We'll jack the thing up. We got to take all the brake rigging and everything out from underneath it. And then we'll jack it up and roll all the wheels out from under it. And then it'll sit here and laugh at us for a couple of months while everything's out being worked on. And the reassembly process goes almost as fast as the disassembly process. Disassembly goes real quick. You know, we've only been 2 days taking the tubes out. A couple days taking the running gear off, so within about 3 weeks' time, the thing goes from a locomotive to nothing but hulk sitting there. Yeah. And then you send the pieces out, you take the pieces out, you spend hours and hours working on them and reconditioning them. And the thing just sits there and laughs at you the whole time. And then when you get everything ready to go back together, the reassembly process goes almost as quickly. So it goes from a hulk sitting on the rail. Within about 3 or 4 weeks, it's got an operating locomotive. Mm-hmm. It's easier sometimes to put back together because everything's new and clean, and you're not fighting rusted bolts and everything froze up. You just kind of put it together, and you just got to take your time to get all the cotter keys in, because if you don't, you get everything tight, and then it comes apart on you down the road somewhere.
The Sumpter Valley Railway Restoration Group felt confident that Doyle and his crew were the folks to rebuild the 19. They talked with him early on about the feasibility of bringing the Mikado back into service on the restoration's line. His crew removed the rods connecting the 4 sets of driving wheels. All of the various pieces had to be checked, cataloged, stored, repaired, or replaced. Underneath the 19, workers removed the brake rigging, while cramped between rails only 3 feet 6 inches apart.
How are they doing, Bob? Where you at?
I'm right here by 3.
3?
We're getting ready to jack the locomotive up to take the wheels out from under it. To do that, you have to sort of disassemble the framework that's around the wheels. we take down what they call the binders here, which form a box frame around the wheels. After we get all of those out, we'll get the jacks in position. We'll start raising the locomotive up so we get it high enough where the wheels will clear the frame here in the back. And then we'll roll all the wheels out the back of it, and then we'll let it back down to normal heights to finish our work on it. But surprisingly enough, you know, these things are a giant oil slick when they travel, so everything is coated with oil and dirt, which forms almost a barrier to the water. So if you look down, you know, you can see that they're not all rusted and corroded like you would think they would be after sitting 40 years.
Even with the oil's protection, some of the pieces were welded with rust. So the binders, along with other vital parts, got a bath in rust-dissolving chemicals. This bath returned the parts to an as-new appearance. Inside the roundhouse, the crew placed hydraulic jacks underneath the locomotive's frame. Lifting a 60-ton locomotive to remove its wheels takes time and patience. Steel beams and wooden blocks formed the foundation, and volunteers from the Sumpter Valley provided the muscle. The rear trailing wheels were removed first.
Me and whose army? Just roll it out with the easy, Ollie. Okay.
As the engine was raised, a bubble made sure that everything stayed level. As the engine rose, heavier jacks replaced the smaller hand-operated ones. And the crew torched off bulky nuts and bolts.
That one's off. That big diesel right there.
Until finally, the rear wheels cleared the frame. Even after 2 decades of inactivity, they still rolled freely. But the 19 wasn't high enough to allow the driving wheels to pass under it yet.
Greg ain't got no air.
After many hours of work, the lowest part of the frame was higher than the driving axles.
You're up a little bit. Pull the block out over there, Will. Now they're going to get hard because you're going to come up on the counterweights. Yeah.
You can see the pits and imperfections caused by running steel wheels over steel rails.
What's going to happen now with those wheels that just came off?
It's just like everything else on the engine. We send it out to the machine shop to get the journals all reconditioned. And then we'll take the driving boxes and get them bored to match, get everything all cleaned up, and then we'll start the reassembly process.
And how about the engine? What's left of it? What's going to happen to this?
Well, we got to finish disassembling all the little pieces on here now. Take all the spring rigging down, pull the pistons out of the process, and recondition everything. That's why I say we're in the disassembly stage now. And once we get it all disassembled, then comes the reconditioning stage, where it just sits here for months and months and doesn't do anything. Then all of a sudden, we start putting all the reconditioned parts back on. It goes back together pretty quickly.
Sometime later, the refurbished wheels were returned and remounted. In the meantime, the frame had been sandblasted clean and repainted.
Little bit. How's that? Good.
Each wheel set weighs about a ton.
Never mind.
After the crew installed the pony truck in the front of the locomotive, the 19 went down just as slowly as she went up. As the frame came down, the leaf springs over the trailing truck and other parts were attached. The engine's cab required considerable work. The original cab was not salvageable, so a sheet metal shop constructed a new one based on the original specs. It was a tight fit. With her cab and wheels attached, the 19 looked like a real locomotive again. Around this time, she received a new lubrication system.
What's this process used for that you just did?
And new boiler tubes. But some replacement parts needed to be forged from raw metal. To make a new part, special sand was finely sifted around a wooden pattern.
Hang on to detail and be easy to work with.
The crew compressed the sand and then removed the wood pattern to form a cavity. Meanwhile, raw stock and surplus parts melted in a crucible. Until it was full of molten metal. Then they poured the metal through a hole into the mold cavity. They poured the extra metal in the crucible into ingots for later use. Once the metal cooled enough, the sand was scooped away to reveal the forged part.
Captain Nemo, we have it.
The part was cleaned, and rough edges or flashing were smoothed off.
We pour it at the right temperature if we need burnt sand.
Grab the end.
The crew reinstalled the boiler tubes.
What do we got here? 102. An 02? Should go right there.
This view from the firebox in the back of the engine shows how precise the tube lengths needed to be. Meanwhile, at the front of the engine, Doyle flared the ends of the tubes.
All right.
And smoothed out the joints.
You weld one end only. Because as you heat the boiler up, the tubes get hot before the barrel does, because the fire is directly in contact with them. And it'll cause the tubes to expand, but the barrel won't expand. So if you had them welded on both ends, it would either buckle the tube up and down, or it would bow the sheets in and out. Either way is an undesirable condition. So you leave them sort of free on the front end, so that they can grow in and out as the boiler expands and contracts.
Heat from the firebox travels down the tubes and causes the water surrounding them to boil. The boiling water creates steam, and this steam is channeled to the cylinders. The cylinders move the pistons, which make the drivers and the wheels turn. While Doyle arc welded the last of the tubes into place, workers began the installation of fittings on the back of the boiler and the wood trim inside the cab. Dedicated Sumpter Valley volunteers created a cab that was a model of finish and functionality. On November 18, 1994, the hydrostatic test was conducted on the reassembled boiler. Water was pumped in to test for leaks. As the water flowed, Doyle, his crew, and Sumpter Valley volunteers carefully checked each fitting and stay bolt.
No, I don't think so. Just where there's filling, that's why I blew it out and watched it.
As the pressure grew, the tension grew as well.
Fairly high official.
Yeah.
It's leave it there long enough in the seat itself. It's not that much. It's just
And the hydrostatic test is the apex, so to speak. Once you get through the hydro, everything from there on down, you're on the downhill side of putting it together and making it run. So we now are through that hydro.
And so how did the hydro test go?
Real well. You know, we had a couple little drips, but you always find that. You're dealing with a cold vessel here that shrinks up when it gets cold, and you put pressure on it. Well, the next big step is a bunch of little steps. We start now. We've got all these components that we've been working on over the months, and it's now simply a matter of starting to reassemble it like a big jigsaw puzzle. And we can re-brick the firebox, we can close up the front end, put the door on, get ready to really make it run like a locomotive.
One of the last big pieces to be reattached was the front of the smoke box. After bolting this heavy iron plate into place, a circular door in the center would allow for future maintenance on the workings inside. As you can tell, Doyle and Company were surprised by its easy assembly. With the smoke box front on and all the bolts tight, it was time for a little fun.
stand up, John. You're not hurt. Whoops, I'm sorry. You are standing up.
I think it's small.
I don't think it's going to fit.
Although if you asked Doyle and the crew, they would have said that rebuilding a 75-year-old steam engine from scratch is enough fun for anyone. One of the most intricate pieces, especially made for the 19, was her number plate. With the original lost, volunteers created an exact replica in wood as the first step towards making one in brass. The detail around the letters required a layer of graphite to keep the sand from sticking to the wood pattern. The pattern also received a sprinkling of talc for the same reason. The crew built an extra heavy box to hold all the sand necessary for the casting. After the box was flipped over, the other half of the pattern was covered.
And this is only half of it. You know, I don't know what to run. Take it over. There we go.
They compressed the sand around the pattern as much as possible, but capturing the detail around the letters proved to be difficult.
Dad. Dad.
Wait.
I've washed my hands.
Yeah, we're going to wash them.
I don't know, I suppose the guy wanted to come back in with a Dremel tool or something, he could carve those out.
Working the sand to form a proper cavity took several attempts, but finally the stack was readied for the infusion of molten brass. The wooden pattern was carefully removed and the two halves were reattached. The holes feeding the cavity were tapered and smoothed, and the brass was poured into the mold.
That's real hard.
Okay, go.
Everyone held their breath.
What is it?
No, we don't know yet. Right on up here.
But unfortunately, the sand cavity had collapsed. The molten brass simply had nowhere else to go.
Yeah. Either that or cut the runner off a little bit shorter and put a riser over here. Well, what I think I would probably do is...
They solved the problem by pouring the two halves separately.
Giant pin. Make some 4-inch pads of fill. Machine off the back.
Success. After a paint job, the number plate would look as good as new. Another tricky job was riveting the tender. A team of 4 men heated, positioned, and pounded into place each rivet. They repeated this process over 1,500 times. In the cab, another crew installed water injectors, valves, doors, air brake controls, and electrical fixtures. As the 19 neared completion, the remaining work proceeded apace. On the brakes, the valve gear, the headlights, the tender, the cowcatcher, the water and steam lines, the running boards, and other metal work. Doyle then went to work on the cowcatcher, made in part from boiler tubes. Her original asbestos covering was exchanged for a blanket of space-age polymers.
Well, starting a little bit after we didn't know that they were starting this until
Supposed to be able to take this up. Put it right in your hand.
Wow. You are brave. Your hand warm?
No, not even warm.
The foundation straps for the boiler jacket were attached. The sheet metal was cut to fit and attached. Throughout the restoration of the 19, Doyle and Sumpter Valley volunteers made every effort to rebuild her as authentically as possible.
Underneath the cab, and this one, again, we're just going to have to estimate the size. They put centered in the cab. This is the locomotive class number. It's MK, period.
You got 5.5 plus half of the letter plus the space in between, so we're at 5.5. Hold that on that. Sure.
When the drivers returned from an outside machine shop, they looked factory fresh. They were given new bushings and installed.
Go off, look at it.
The air brake pumps, cylinders, hoses, and gauges were all returned to their original condition. The 19 was on a roll. At last, she was ready for her first steal.
Again. Relax the door so if it blows, it don't blow the door off. All right, let's try her again. Whoa!
We'll take the stack lid off now.
We have ignition.
You got the lid on the stack too.
Look at that, actually smoke coming out.
She received a set of marker lights.
Well, I just put the clamp on the tank hose.
Power for her headlight. And her voice. In time, Doyle, his crew, and the volunteers finished their work. And brought the 19 out of the roundhouse under her own power.
Am I on air hose?
Drop off to the outside, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you'll drop off to the outside.
Go ahead.
What?
Wondering if that edge is pretty sharp for that crest.
I don't think it's going to be any sharper than coming through that hook.
A little help.
Okay, you're okay, keep going.
Not this one, okay.
Where was that?
That was just the joint over there.
Yeah, we're dragging.
Okay. Well, we're all on except for the pilot.
During the 5 years that the 19 sat in this stall, occasional visitors glimpsed the work as it proceeded. Now, steam enthusiasts everywhere would get a chance to see and ride behind a renewed example of railroading's history. Her first stop was the 100th anniversary celebration for Portland's Union Station. She ran up and down a section of track temporarily relayed to meet her narrow gauge needs. This got the kinks out of her joints and gave the Sumpter Valley crew a good training session. In the process, the 19 delighted kids, adults, and old folks alike. While two of the West's most famous steamers looked on, and Amtrak trains came and went, the 19 stole the show. After her Portland debut, the 19 traveled home to Sumpter Valley. On Memorial Day weekend 1996, she steamed along her old right-of-way for the first time in 55 years. To the volunteers of the Sumpter Valley Railway Restoration, 19's arrival culminated years of hard work and persistence. The loving attention she received from Doyle and his crew ensures that she'll be hauling visitors to Sumpter and reliving the spirit of the Stump Dodger for years to come.